Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and I'm finally ready to bring you my Mummy ranking from the Goosebumps series. This video will be called like Goosebumps Mummy Ranking or something like that, but it's been a long time coming, and I have to say, off the bat, the Mummy stories in Goosebumps, y'all, are kind of hit or miss for me, and I'll be upfront and honest. The trope about going to an Egyptian pyramid in Egypt and encountering mummies is one of my least favorite tropes because it's done ad nauseum in so many levels of media. But I did come away with some personal favorites in this little subgenre within the Goosebumps series. I definitely think that the mummy stories are one of the more prevalent things next to like living doll stories like Slappy the Dummy, and countless short stories and Give Yourself Goosebumps books based around that stuff, and werewolves, typical things you'd come to expect in the genre. But the mummy stories here are mostly solid. There's really no bad ones in the bunch, and I was really surprised by that. But there are some weak ones, and in this ranking today, I'm going to be going from the worst to best, covering 11 items here. Now, the items I chose range from full books to Give Yourself Goosebumps books to short stories from Tales and Triple Header to episodes of the TV show and a TV book as well. Now, I could add two more if I wanted to. I do have original art hanging up right here of Don't Wake Mummy. This came from the FBX magazine series in the UK. And there was also another mummy one they did was early on called The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. And I could include them here, but they're really two-page truncation comic adaptations, and in my opinion, it's not really worth bringing up in this video. But just so you know, they do exist, and I put the camera in a weird position just so you can see the art here in the video to kind of represent that. But I will be covering 11 things, and I'm going to run down them specifically. The episodes I'll be covering are the Return of the Mummies episode and Don't Wake Mummies episode. Return of the Mummy had a TV book, so I also will be including that in the ranking as well. And then the short stories, Don't Wake Mummy was a short story in Tales that Give You Goosebumps, so I'll be covering that. And then The Mummy with My Face was a short story from the Triple Header series, so that's on there, so we're already at 5. And then the remainder are pretty much the main books advertising mummies. Now, there are some Give Yourself Goosebumps books with mummies in them, but I'm only including the ones that are specifically advertised for the mummy, I guess, type of story here. So from the original 62, it's going to be The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Return of the Mummy. From Series 2000, it's going to be The Mummy Walks. Give Yourself Goosebumps is going to be Diary of a Mad Dummy. The Horrorland series is going to have Who's Your Mummy? And the Slappy World series is going to have The Dummy Meets the Mummy. So that totals in 11 items to rank. Now, like I said, I'm going to be going from worst to best. This is just my opinion. Opinion is subjective. And just know that in case one of these happen to be your favorite, I'm not trying to crap on your favorites here. I'm just giving my thoughts, and I'll tell you why I put them where I did. But before we go any further, please let me know down in the comment section right now. Pause the video. How would you rate these 11 things from worst to best, in your opinion? I really want to know from you all. So without any further ado, let's get into the ranking. Alright, so at number 11, this is dead last for me for pretty much all the right reasons to put it last, I would say. I gave this like a 3.1 out of 5. It's one of the episodes from the TV show. It's a really hated episode, but I don't really hate it outright. I just think it's not good, but not bad either. Very, very meh, in my opinion. But it's the Return of the Mummy episode. I gave this thing like a 3.1 out of 5, which is like a D minus, basically. And the reason being is that on one hand, I think that the episode does improve on some things, in my opinion, as in terms of cutting out the filler from the book makes this episode a little bit easier to digest. And there were some clever changes here that I really appreciated. And I do appreciate the setting effort here. They try to make it look like a pyramid as much as possible. And for that, I give it credit, right? But in my opinion, this is one of the worst acted episodes. And the main characters, Gabe and Sorry, they were the main focal characters from the first two original 62 Goosebumps books. And in Return of the Mummy, the book really improved those characters, in my opinion, from Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. But in the episode, it feels like a downgrade. They feel more stock and cardboard than Return of the Mummy did. You know, I think Stein put a little more effort into characterizing those characters. Whether it's good or not, in your opinion, in the books, that's one thing. But in the episode, they just come off unlikable. And I think part of the reason of that is pretty much from terrible acting. Gabe's actor, Daniel DeSanto, is one of the worst actors from the show, and I'll stand by that. It's hard to get immersed into this episode. And there's one iconic thing I think that he brings to the table with this. It's that iconic scream when you see him screaming at a skeleton. That's iconic. But everything else is atrocious here with his acting. Sorry's actress, for some reason they made her way younger than she is in the book. And she's annoying. Like, her character is just really unlikable. The uncle is pretty much invisible in the episode. When he is around, he really doesn't matter much. I think his name's Uncle Ben. I think he was a little bit better in the books, to be honest. Even Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. The villain is still weak like the book. I'm not a fan of Prince Koru. And whatever the woman villain, I forget what her name is. The woman villain of the story here, her acting isn't too bad, but her voice, or I guess the ADR of her Egyptian accent, is atrocious too. And not to mention the ending, it's kind of different from the book. And there's this concept with the summoner that Gabe has that I thought was kind of cool. It's a little more prevalent here in the episode, but the ending makes no sense of how it came back, and it's really baffling. So, yeah, it just has a lot more problems to me than the rest. I think, honestly, if it had good acting, I would put it up a notch higher. But the acting is just so bad, it puts it here. Dead last. So at number 11, it's Return of the Mummies episode. Alright. At number 10, we have one of the books from the original 62. Now, if you watched my review of this, I was not really impressed with this. I think this is one of the most mediocre Goosebumps books ever made. And it's book number 5 from the original series, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Now, when I say it's mediocre, I'm not trying to discredit its writing and its prowess. I think Stein really put a lot of effort into the writing ability that he's able to bring to the table in this book. His atmosphere building, his, I guess Gabe's inner monologue in the story was really detailed, a little more detailed than usual. The action, the way that was written in the story was really well done. I have a lot of technical compliments to this book. But when it comes to story and characters, this just fails, in my opinion. Now, I will say this. The climax in the final act of this book is essentially perfect. I really dig the villain of the story, and I dig how the whole story wraps up. But everything else is just no. The characters. Gabe is one of the, at least in this book, is one of the worst Goosebumps characters I've ever read. He is beyond annoying. All he does is constantly whine. He's really gullible, kind of naive, and gets under my skin a little bit. And then Sorry and Uncle Ben are really unlikable because they just keep fueling these pranks. And the first half of this book is just essentially pranks around an Egyptian pyramid. It's so annoying. Until Ahmed, I think the guy's name is Ahmed, comes into the story. It's a big old snooze fest. And not to mention, the cliches in this story, mummy cliches are all over this. And I'm not a fan of it. It's just something that really just grinds my gears. There's no reinventing the wheel here. Maybe minus with Ahmed. I can understand if you enjoy the book for him. But the first half of this book is just really rough. Gabe's pretty much rough throughout the entirety of it. The characters are unlikable. And yeah, I just don't know. It's just, nothing really clicks for me here. I don't think it's a bad book, but I also don't think it's a good book. I think if Gabe and the characters, if they were more likable, this would be up quite a few more spots because of the writing ability, and I think it's better written than the next book above it. But yeah, it's here. It's my number 10. It is what it is. So, at number 9, we're going to the first short story here. And it comes from Triple Header Book 2, and it's The Mummy with My Face. Now, this one I think I gave, let me say, I gave like a 3.3 out of 5 to Curse of the Mummy's Tomb for a full book. This is like a 3.5 for a short story, which is kind of average, and that's how I feel about this story. There's something about it that I really like. I like the fact that the pyramid in the story is a reference to Curse of the Mummy's Tomb pyramid. There's some implications of continuity in the story that really got to me. And one thing I really enjoy about this story overall is that it does something a little bit different with the pyramid story in Egypt, kind of playing on the pyramid scheme a little bit. It's a lot more cartoonish and comical, but I really enjoy the changing of character perspectives in the story. You hardly ever get that. I think I've seen it in like I Am Your Evil Twin and maybe one other thing in Goosebumps. You hardly ever see it, and when it's done, it's always a fun shake-up, and I appreciate it for that. But everything else is, like I said, it just feels a little over the top and really just nonsensical, kind of ridiculous in some ways. It feels like a plot of a Scooby-Doo episode, and I mean that as a thing of disrespect towards it, because when you read this short story and you get to the reveal part, it comes off like a wet fart. I'm not going to lie. But, like I said, the character perspective change is kind of interesting. But, really, this story's mostly pointless. But it makes me laugh. It kind of makes me connect to a younger age of my life. Even, I was reading Goosebumps at a young age already. But it reminds me of enjoying stuff like Scooby-Doo and stuff. And I don't know, I get a kick out of it. This is one of the stories in Goosebumps that I think like all ages could really enjoy. It's not really scary at all. It's just there. And it just kind of exists in terms of the short stories overall, whether we're talking Tales or Triple Header. It's mostly a filler story, but it works for what it is. So yeah, that's my number 9. Alright. And my number 8 goes to the other original 62 book, Return of the Mummy. I think I gave this book a 3.6 out of 5, which is like a C, a low C, maybe like a C minus. It's average, fine. It's a fine book. I think on one hand, it really improves the characters of Gabe, Sorry, and Uncle Ben, which is really appreciated by me. And that made me more inclined to get into Gabe's character and enjoy the story a little bit more. But if I'm being honest, the monologue that we saw in Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and how detailed the prowess was and all that was not prevalent here. This was very basic writing from Stein, and I noticed that change almost immediately, and I really don't have any technical compliments to the story, and that stems down to the storytelling ability and what the story's able to bring. In my opinion, this is arguably even more cliche than Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, but what I do like is the cool summoner bit that Gabe picks up from the airport. I like that aspect to the story. There are some decent red herrings and some stuff you don't really come to expect. I think the climax had a really tense-filled scene, but it also kind of just feels whatever to me. Because the villain in this story, Prince Koru, I know he's a mascot of Goosebumps, but he's a really weak villain, y'all. He's easily the weakest mummy villain of them all. And I can't even remember all their names, but I remember Prince Koru for being just really bad. And I guess his sister, too. I forget her name. What is it? Shira, Mira, Kira? I don't know. Something like that. And please correct me down in the comment section, but yeah, it's fine. It doesn't really blow my socks off or anything. It's kind of forgettable. I forgot a lot about this plot. Same thing with Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, but it's alright. So that's number 8. Now, number 7, brace yourselves. This might piss a lot of you off by me putting this here, but I don't really rate these based on enjoyability or my thoughts on the story per se. I'm usually rating these based on their adequacy on being a supplement to the TV episodes. But I'm putting Return of the Mummy's TV book in number 7. I dare say that I prefer this over the episode. And essentially what this book does, it doesn't really change much from the episode whatsoever. It's pretty much spot on, minus a few details, and I forget the exact ones. But they're not really significant ones. But the only reason why I give this the edge over the episode is because you don't have to hear the wretched acting. And for that, it makes it more enjoyable. And I think Gabe has more of a monologue in here than the episode portrayed. And I think reading the episode's script just makes me appreciate the story more and appreciate Gabe's character more than the episode, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, or Return of the Mummy's book was able to do. And yeah, it cuts out all the filler the book had. And like I could have mentioned it there, but yeah, the book had a lot of filler to it. And yeah, I think this is a little bit better of an improvement. I didn't give an exact point system for this based on enjoyability or my actual thoughts, but I'd probably give this like a 4 out of 5 stars on enjoyability. It's one of the more solid pyramid mummy stories that Goosebumps has to offer. So yeah, that's Return of the Mummy's TV book number 7. Now, at number 6, this might break a lot of your hearts out there for people who love this book. But I enjoyed this one. This is one I consider above average, so we're now getting to like B-tier territory. And this is the last of the going overseas mummy stories, which I'm not really a fan of. I think this one is the best one. And it's from Series 2000. It's book 16, The Mummy Walks. Now, this story was really intriguing to me. It almost feels like it shouldn't have been a mummy book. It kind of feels like that was added on to it to kind of help the marketing of it. But this book is mostly a book about war and terrorism and stuff. And I was really taken back by the intro to the story. That was really, really heavy-hitting stuff for a Goosebumps character to handle. I was not expecting that. And the way the story handles it is really bonkers. And I appreciate where the story goes at some places. You essentially have this kid going overseas to this small country that has this links to an ancient person that became a mummy that holds a gem. And this gem is said, like, whoever possesses it holds the authority of the country and whatnot. And this kid is like an heir to the throne and is being targeted by these war generals to go find this mummy. And it's such a bizarre story. You hardly see mummy in it, and it arguably has the least mummy in it in totality. And I think that's pretty much a huge problem in all the ones that involve you going to Egypt or overseas to see the mummy. It has a lot of textbook problems that the other books had before this one, but this was still enjoyable. It has its problems. I'm not a big fan of the ending. At least the way it handles it. It's not really that good. But it's above average. I gave this like a 4.2 out of 5. And I totally understand if this one was your favorite. It's just not my favorite one. And I'm sorry if you hear banging. We have a broken washing machine, so you might hear some banging while we're washing clothes. I apologize. So, that's my number 6. The Mummy Walks. Now, we're in my top 5. My top 5 is pretty much from here on out A-tier stuff, and all of these stories do not involve going to Egypt, at least in the traditional sense, like the previous books did. And the Mummy Walks didn't have them go to Egypt, but it was something kind of similar to that. These are the type of mummy stories I like, right? And these are the standouts in my opinion. And some of you might agree, some of you might disagree, but let's have fun. So my number 5 goes to the last mummy story I needed to read for this ranking, and it is from Slappy World, and it's The Dummy Meets the Mummy. I was blown away by the prologue of this book. This is easily the scariest thing I've ever seen with mummies done in Goosebumps. That was really good. Aragotis, the mummy in the story, was fantastic. I mean, he was nerfed as the story goes along, and that's one of my issues with the book. But for the most part, I like the concept with him and how the kids were able to, like, read a phrase that makes them come to life. Adding the Slappy trope onto a mummy was really interesting to see. And the fight between him and Slappy was great. My only issue with this story is the resolution. And when you understand Aragotis' motive with these kids the whole time, and mild spoiler alert, it deals with tickling and laughing, that's just pure cringe. Especially with what we got beforehand in the story, that really upset me. And the ending to this book is a wet fart. One really bad ending. It's not quite the worst, but it's down there, bottom 20 of all time, in my opinion. It makes me really reevaluate my issues with Slappy's Nightmare, and I've said that a couple times with some other dummy books, but this one especially, because this ending was not great at all. But for the most part, solid and fun book. Can't go wrong with this. Had a blast with it. Takes place in a museum. I like that aspect. I like the family, collecting bizarre things from around the world that deal with horror. There goes the banging again. I'm sorry if you hear it. But yeah, really fun story. That's my number 5. All right. At number 4, this one upsets me because this should be my number 1, because one of the arcs in this was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved the first arc of this. This is the Give Yourself Goosebumps Mummy book. But it has its issue with the other arc, and I just have to put it here. I gave this one a 4.5, just like The Dummy Meets the Mummy. And I just like this one more, so I put this one above it in the number 4 slot. And it's Diary of a Mad Mummy. Now, Diary of a Mad Mummy, what I love about this story is the main arc that takes place pretty much throughout majority of the book. This is kind of unorthodox for the Give Yourself Goosebumps books because most of the time they're evenly split between 135 or 138 pages down between 2 arcs. But this main arc, I would say, is like 90 or so pages. And the main arc that involves you, visiting a museum in San Francisco, and you see this mummy diary appear at your feet, and you get to read the diary and hear the thoughts of a mummy, like putting it to paper with its mind, and that concept is really cool. And where the story goes down the main arc, when you get to try to catch him trying to escape the museum, and you get to pick up his bandages, or the bandages attached to you, is very reminiscent to something like Werewolf Skin in The Haunted Mask, which are some of my favorite Goosebumps stories ever made. And that trope of that object kind of possessing the wearer is one of my favorite things in Goosebumps, period, or in horror in general. And that story was absolutely fantastic. The body horror was great. All the endings were pretty much stellar, spot on, exactly what I was looking for. And it's top tier GYG level stuff, in my opinion. Now, the other mini arc that's kind of smaller, dealing with you going to, the elevator ending up in a pyramid in Egypt. Very cliche stuff. The gameplay function, there is gameplay functions in this book, were not that great, and it could have made that second arc a little bit better, and it could have propped up the story a little bit more. But for the most part, I really dug a lot of stuff this book did, and there are also some trivia aspects I was not expecting to see in it that I really enjoyed as well, dealing with like Return of the Mummy and stuff. I wish we had more of it, but what we got was enough, and made me come out loving this one. So that's my number 4. All right, now my top 3. All right, by process of elimination, we have Who's Your Mummy, Don't Wake Mummy short story, and Don't Make Mummies episode. And my number 3, I really, in an alternate reality, this could end up being my number 1. Maybe if I reread this in the future, it might score higher. But I did not expect to love this one as much as I did. And I have no shame in putting this at my number 3. It is from the Horrorland series. It's book 6, Who's Your Mummy? This book I gave like a 4.6 out of 5, which is like a pretty decent A score, like an A-, but still really good. And a little bit step above the other 2 below this one in my top 5. But man, this story shocked me. Now, I'm only talking about the main story that's like around like 100 or so pages, y'all. But there's something about this that should not work on paper. It really should not work, but it does. Something about these kids visiting their estranged uncle's house, who's an Egyptologist, and they have to go through this story not knowing if he's actually their real uncle or not. Maybe, you know, the relative that referred them to their uncle is maybe senile or something. There's something about it that's just really creepy and unnerving. The atmosphere is really fun. I like the setting of the house, and the tension in the story really gets me. The characters are engaging. And some stuff you see in this is really fun for a mummy story. Like, there's mummies eating mummy guts to stay alive, and like, there's some really unique concepts with mummies and Goosebumps done here. Really enjoyed this story. I'm not really remembering too much of why I put it at this score. I think it's just some logical things with the story that just don't add up. Some inconsistencies in it, but for the most part, really solid stuff. And I would love to have a hardcover of this book, because this was pretty great. But not my favorite. And now, by process of elimination, my top two are Don't Wake Mummies short story and Don't Wake Mummies episode. Now, if you watched my short story versus episode video, I essentially tied these because I don't give exact, points for short stories, but I do for episodes, and sometimes points kind of correlate similarly. And this one was the toughest one to pick because Don't Wake Mummy, in my opinion, is my personal favorite Mummy story in Goosebumps, and possibly one of my all-time favorite Goosebumps stories ever. I haven't really decided. I have it hanging up here, right here, from the FBX magazine strip, because I love it so much. And the artwork is really cool, too. But that's beyond the point. I had to decide. This is a ranking. I had to decide number one and number two. And it was hard. It was really hard because they're both kind of different in their own fun ways. But if I had to choose my favorite, I went with the short story. So at number two is the episode. Now, the episode is one of my favorite episodes of the whole show. I think I gave this like a 4.7 out of 5. I think the actor who plays the main character here, Jeff, is not that good. But everything else about this episode is rock solid. There's something about the idea of the story that really gets to me. This kid, he's bullied by his older sister, and his older sister likes to prank him and scare him all the time. And his parents are like Egyptologists, and his dad's over in Egypt. And in the episode version, he sends the mummy home to his wife to read and study the inscriptions on the side of this mummy sarcophagus. And the sarcophagus ends up getting put down in the basement, and his sister is trying to like mess around with him, trying to scare him with her friend, and they accidentally open up the sarcophagus, like break a seal in the sarcophagus, and unleash this mummy inside of their house. And it's just like a really short and sweet story about a mummy just coming alive in some kid's house, and they have to deal with it. And what makes it cool and memorable is that the mom that's there in the story gets involved in the story, and the way it's just shot, it's just really well done. I mean, I give props to the music department, the producers, the makeup effects, the screenplay writers, the directors, all of it deserve a thumbs up from me. Very memorable episode. I know it's not a popular one. I think some people think that it's one of the weaker episodes, but not in my opinion. There's some stuff in here that's done with the mummy, like the whole garbage disposal bit was really cool. The whole the tension that builds up, dealing when the mummy reveals and the family realizes that the mummy's actually alive. That stuff is really good, and there's some shocking stuff I did not expect to see. And one thing I love about this episode, that's one of my favorite things in all of Goosebumps, is the mummy cat. If you've seen that that ending, that's absolutely iconic to me. One of my favorite things to ever come out of Goosebumps, period. If I ever make a top 10 favorite moments, that's there. Easily. That was awesome. But it's my number two, reluctantly, but I love this one. Really have a soft spot for it. But my number one, by process of elimination, goes to Don't Wake Mummy short story. Now, I do waver on this one sometimes. Depends on my mood. I used to kind of think it was a 4.5 out of 5. But after rereading it, I'm willing to give this like a 5 out of 5. I think this is a perfect short story. Now, this version is definitely different from the episode. There's no mummy cat or anything. And it's done a little bit differently. But in the short story, I love the comeuppance tale that Jeff has over his older sister. And the whole family's involved. The dad comes back because he realizes the mistake. He accidentally sent the sarcophagus to the family's home. It wasn't intentional in this version. And there's something that's done in the story that's outright shocking. And it deals with the older sister. And when the family realizes what happened, it's a little too late. And it's just something about it that just sticks with me. And it still has a lot of those iconic moments of the mummy coming to life in the house. It's very unorthodox. And, you know, normally you see like this done with a vampire. You invite a vampire in your house and it runs amok for a night. And you got to survive the night, right? Or you see this done in like maybe like, I don't know, Sam Raimi movies with the Evil Dead. Movies when they read the Necronomicon and it comes to life and you gotta survive the night. But this has that vibe to it, just with mummies. And you wouldn't think that the story is all that special, but trust me, you gotta read this. This is just so well thought out, well put together, has a great moral to it, a really messed up, twisted ending, which is kind of iconic in my opinion. In my opinion, this is easily one of the most, if not the most underrated short story out of all the Tales short stories. And I think in terms of, you know, when I think to the mummy stories and Goosebumps, this is always the first thing I think about. And I always think about the ending to the short story and how iconic it is and just how well thought out it is and how well crafted it is as well. It's just it's essentially perfect in my opinion. And that's why it's my number one. Some people might disagree with that, but that's just my opinion. So, that wraps up my mummy ranking here, y'all. Look at all that. So, yeah, let me know down in the comment section, what would your ranking look like based on the 11 things I talked about? To kind of give you my final thoughts on the mummy stories. Like I said before, the trope of going to Egypt got old, especially in the earlier Goosebumps stories. Pretty much from the first Curse of the Mummy's Tomb all the way through, I guess, Tales Book 2, minus Don't Wake Mummy. Every mummy story after that released was really good. Sorry, the banging's going on again. Running gag for this video, y'all. But, yeah, when it comes to the mummy pyramid stuff, not a fan. But when it comes to the unorthodox mummy stuff taking place in, like, homes or taking place in museums and stuff, I like that a little bit more. And yeah, I would go out of my way to say, if you are new to Goosebumps and you haven't really tried much mummy stories before, I would recommend pretty much my top 6 from the Mummy Walks all the way through Don't Wake Mummy short story. Those, in my opinion, are the standouts. Now, if you want to try more of the Mummy Pyramid stuff, I do recommend Return of the Mummy's book or TV book. If you really want to do it all, I guess you can add in the short story from Triple Header, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, or Return of the Mummy's episode, but you don't really need to read those. Maybe Curse of the Mummy's Tomb might get you a little more because it is one of the better written Goosebumps books out there, in my opinion, and I will give it that. It's just really weak in terms of story, but I was pleasantly surprised by how many stories really impressed me in this subgenre, and yeah, it gets a thumbs up. 2 thumbs up for me, for the most part. No bad books, and that's really good. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the, you know, the Mummy franchise and Goosebumps. Let me know down in the comment section, what did you think about my ranking? Do you think I got stuff wrong? Do you like my ranking? Like I said before, go post your ranking down in the comments. I want to see that. And I'll see y'all later.